For the majority of One Piece, Rocksteady Xebec existed as nothing more than a ghost within One Piece. This is the man who Roger and Garp had to team up to defeat, the captain who commanded Whitebeard, Big Mom and Kaido before they became emperors. But now, after the God Valley flashback, we finally know the complete truth about who Rocksteady Xebec really was, and honestly the reality is so much more tragic and complex than any of us could have predicted. This video will be my definitive breakdown of Rocksteady Xebec. We'll go over his origins, ambitions, his relationships, as well as his powers and ultimately his devastating fall. So we start at the very beginning because Rox's entire life was defined by a secret that he couldn't escape. His real name wasn't Rocksteady Xebec, it was Davy D. Xebec. He was born on God Valley to the Davy family, direct descendants to the legendary pirate Davy D. Jones from 800 years ago. This is the same Davy Jones who was apparently once a king of the world, whose very name makes Emu lose their composure. The world government had been systematically trying to erase his family from existence for over 800 years. He watched as the Davy clan had to live in hiding on God Valley, surviving in the criminal underworld's shadows, always looking over their shoulders. Emu genuinely wanted every single member of Rox's family dead. So Rox made a choice. He changed his name and became Rocksteady Xebec to the world, hiding his connection to Davy Jones. Only his wife Eris and his close friend Harald had known the truth. This was a massive weight to carry, that if anyone discovered who you really were, it wouldn't just be you who died, it would be your entire family, including your wife and newborn son. This context helps us to better understand Rox's actions. His ambition to become the king of the world wasn't just out of a power trip, it was about reclaiming what his ancestor had apparently once held. Before the God Valley flashback, we knew almost nothing about Rox's personality. Whitebeard referred to him as careless, Big Mom said that he was untrustworthy, the crew had no camaraderie, but the flashback revealed something totally different. Rox was actually an incredibly complicated person with a bizarre mix of brutality and honor. Rox absolutely had a violent streak. When he needed King Harald to return to Elbaph quickly, he didn't hesitate to seriously wound the 15-year-old Prince Loki, just straight up stabbed a child to force a situation to happen. When Loki later challenged him to a duel, Rox savagely beat him and left a blade impaled in him. He was clearly sending a message here. Rox got what he wanted through fear and power, and he didn't care who got hurt in the process. His crew was also terrified of him. Kaido, who ended up becoming the world's strongest creature, suggested to Rox that Harald join their crew, but after Rox had threatened him, he immediately backed down on the suggestion. Big Mom straight up called Rox good for nothing and untrustworthy. Shiki laughed at the idea of caring whether if Rox lived or died, and these were some of the most powerful pirates in history, and they all recognized that Rox was dangerous, unpredictable, and just someone you couldn't trust. But here's where things get interesting. Despite this violence, Rox had a strict code of honor for those he genuinely respected. When Kaido suggested forcibly subduing Harald and the giants of Elbaph, Rox didn't just disagree, he violently attacked Kaido for disrespecting his friend. He called Harald his dear and personal friend, despite Harald repeatedly refusing to join his crew. Rox kept returning to Elbaph, kept drinking with Harald, kept trying to recruit him, but he never forced the issue on him. He could have, as he had the power to, but he wouldn't betray that friendship of his. And then there is the family side of Rox that we saw at the God Valley incident. Rox sent his wife and infant son to God Valley in order to protect them from his criminal lifestyle. When he learned that the world government was targeting the island, Rox immediately dropped everything. He didn't care about Shakuyaku, even though his crew was obsessed with rescuing her. He didn't care about the devil fruits or treasures that were available. He had one mission, which was to save his family. Rox explicitly told Harald that as long as his wife and son escaped alive, nothing else mattered. Not his crew, the treasure, or even his own life. The scene where Eris demands Rox to put her down so he can fight properly, where she reminds him that she didn't fall in love with him to be protected like some helpless damsel, that is one of the most powerful moments in the God Valley flashback. Eris understood who Rox was. She accepted the danger of loving a man with the world's most haunted bloodline. Rox trusted her enough to let her go and get to safety with their son, just so that he could fight at his full strength, as he believed that they would reunite later. Rox's ambition was to become king of the world, not pirate king. That was Roger's dream. Rox wanted to literally rule the world, to sit on that throne in Merijo, and he had an actual plan to make it happen. His plan required 3 specific pieces. First, he needed 2 particular devil fruits. We don't know which ones, but Eris mentioned that Rox wasn't ready when he confronted Emu, suggesting that these fruits were specifically meant to counter Emu's power. Second, he needed King Harald, not just any giant, specifically Harald with his ancient giant blood and his connection to Elbaph's military power. Third, he needed the Galila, that legendary band of giant warrior shipwrights who'd been frozen in ice centuries ago. Rox explicitly told Loki that he and Harald together could raise the Galila and take back the peak of the world. Rox believed that with Harald's power and these specific devil fruits and the Galila's strength, they could actually defeat Emu and overthrow the world government. He'd been building towards this for decades. In the end, Rox never got those fruits. Harald refused to join him and the Galila remained frozen. His entire master plan fell apart because he couldn't unite the pieces that he needed. When Rox finally confronted Emu at God Valley, he was forced to fight without any of his planned advantages and he ended up losing. And what makes this more heartbreaking is that Rox knew he probably wouldn't survive God Valley. He told Harald as much. He accepted that his dream of ruling the world might die with him, but he thought that just maybe, if he could save Teach, his son could inherit that dream. The Davy family's promise, whatever that actually means, could be fulfilled by the next generation. Towards the end of the God Valley incident flashback, Rox was transformed into a possessed demon as Emu forced him to hunt his own family. His final act in the story was begging Roger and Garp through the voice of all things to kill him before he murdered everyone that he loved. When it comes to the Rox pirates, he had built his crew through Davy back fights, which is such a perfect detail. He didn't recruit people through friendship or shared ideas, he defeated them in combat and forced them to join the Rox pirates. Whitebeard, Shiki, Big Mom, Kaido, Captain John, Ojoku, all of these legends were essentially Rox's combat trophies. They respected his strength because they had to, not because they wanted to. The crew dynamic was actively hostile. They constantly tried to kill each other. During their raid on Foot Colony, when Rox was keeping watch for Marines, his crew was too busy fighting amongst themselves to properly rob the temple. At God Valley, Captain John literally betrayed everyone by using his magnetism fruit to steal all of the treasure for himself. Shiki casually mentioned that whether if Rox lived or died, it was completely irrelevant to him. These people were not fond of each other. But what's interesting is that they also had this weird functional cooperation when it mattered. When random pirates tried to ambush them at God Valley, Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, and Shiki instantly worked together to annihilate the threat. When Emu appeared at God Valley, the Rox pirates were able to coordinate a combined attack. While they were dysfunctional, they weren't totally incompetent. Rox himself didn't seem to care about the infighting. He openly told his crew that they could leave if they disagreed with his plans. He never tried to build camaraderie or loyalty. His relationship with his crew mirrored Blackbeard's relationship with his crew decades later. Pirates united by aligned interests, not friendship. The difference is that Blackbeard inherited this model from his father and refined it. Rox was the original. The crew's complete lack of loyalty became their downfall. The moment that Rox died, they ended up scattering. No one tried to avenge him, no one honored his memory. Shiki immediately declared the Rox pirates were over. Big Mom and Kaido went their separate ways. Despite their weird sibling dynamic, Whitebeard formed his own crew with a completely opposite philosophy, building a family instead of a collection of rivals. Decades later, none of them talk about Rox that much. Whitebeard actively avoided the subject. When Kaido and Big Mom formed their alliance on Wano, they referenced their time on the Rox pirates. But neither of them expressed any loyalty or fondness for Rox himself. Their captain had been erased from their narratives just as thoroughly as the world government erased him from history. Then there's the relationship between Rox and Harald, which might be the most emotionally complex part of Rox's character. These two men respected each other deeply. They spent decades as friends, but yet fundamentally could never understand each other's worldview. They first met 56 years before the present timeline, when both infiltrated the Reverie. Rox had just confronted Emu and needed to escape. Harald was there for his own reasons, probably related to his diplomatic efforts for Elbaph. They had to work together to blast through Merijo and jump off of the Red Line. That initial cooperation had sparked something. Rox was actually impressed by Harald's strength. strength. He was a giant with ancient giant blood, royal status, and combat abilities that could match Rock's blow for blow. Rox immediately saw Harald as the key to his world domination plan, but more than that, Rox actually liked Harald. He kept coming back to Elbaph not just to recruit him, but to drink with him and talk with him in order to maintain their friendship even when Harald kept refusing his offers. Harald, meanwhile, was going through his transformation from a warmongerer to peace seeker. The arrogant, violent prince who once enjoyed destruction was slowly becoming a king who dreamed of Elbaph joining the community of nations peacefully. Ida's influence had fundamentally changed Harald. He wanted to prove that giants could be more than bloodthirsty warriors. Rox thought that this was naive stupidity. He explicitly told Harald that the world government would never accept Elbaph, and that giants were too useful as weapons to ever be treated as equals. Every time Harald tried to build diplomatic relationships, the world government sabotaged him. When Harald saved Inishi's citizens from world government imprisonment, the propaganda spun it as a hostile attack. Harald even shaved his own horns as a gesture of goodwill, and the world government still wouldn't accept Elbaph. Rox was right in the end. The world government was using Harald, manipulating his desire for peace in order to control him. When the five elders offered to accept Elbaph into the world government, it was in exchange for Harald killing Rox, and that should have been Harald's wake-up call. They literally asked him to murder his friend to prove Elbaph's loyalty, but Harald accepted their condition anyway. Rox and Harald's final fight on Elbaph before the God Valley incident is heartbreaking. Rox kept trying to explain that the world government was just using Harald as a puppet. Harald refused to listen, insisting that some Marines were good people and that joining the government was worth the compromises. They ended up fighting to a stalemate, and Rox finally gave up on recruiting Harald, and this was the moment where their friendship had ended. Following this, they had one last meeting. On the way to God Valley, with world government ships monitoring them, Rox asked Harald for a private conversation, and this is where Rox did something incredible. He told Harald his real name, Davy D. Xebec, and the truth about his bloodline, as well as his family and son. Rox trusted Harald with a secret that he'd kept even from his entire crew. Rox explained that he was going to God Valley in order to save his family, not for treasure or shakuyaku. He asked Harald for help one final time, and Harald refused once again. But he also refused to stop Rox. Harald ordered his giants not to fight back, letting the Rox pirates damage their ship and pass through. It was Harald's way of saying, I can't help you directly, but I won't stop you either. When Emu later told Rox that they planned to subjugate Elbaph, Rox's immediate response was to angrily demand that they leave Harald and his nation alone. Even as a demon who's possessed, even while being controlled, Rox's concern for Harald broke through, and when Harald learned that Rox had died at God Valley, he was devastated. He ripped his own horns off in grief and shame, realizing that he'd abandoned his friend when Rox needed him the most. Harald's deal with the world government eventually destroyed him. His son Loki would be branded as a cursed prince, and everything Harald tried to build through compromise and peace would crumble. Rox had warned him that this would happen, but Harald didn't listen, and that might be the cruelest irony of it all. During his era, Rox was one of the strongest individuals alive. Very quickly, we learned that he had killed a Marine admiral. This is significant because in the present timeline, admirals are portrayed as near unstoppable forces. Akainu tanked a beating from an enraged Whitebeard and kept fighting. Kizaru moves at light speed. Fujitora can call down meteors. These aren't people that you can casually kill, but Rox did exactly that, and apparently it wasn't even his biggest achievement. He single-handedly destroyed one of the gates of justice, these massive structures that regulate the Tarai current between Eni's lobby, Impel Down, and Marine headquarters. The same gates that require the entire Whitebeard pirates' combined strength to break through during Marineford. Rox obliterated one of the gates on his own. His swordsmanship was famous for creating attacks that hit like gigantic hammers or cannonballs. When he clashed with Harald, the shockwave blasted everyone within 5 kilometers. When he swung his sword at Marine battleships, he blew holes straight through them with single strikes. His named technique technique, Pandemonium, was a two-handed slash powerful enough that even Emu had to acknowledge it. Rox mastered both armament and Supreme King Haki to the highest levels. He could infuse Supreme King Haki into his attacks, something only a handful of the very strongest can do. When he fought Figaland, Garling, and the Holy Knights, his Haki-infused attacks were powerful enough to actually damage their immortal bodies and slow their regeneration. Garling explicitly said that it would take a while to fully recover from Rox's assault, but here's what really demonstrates Rox's power: it's his presence in battle. Kaido included Rox in his mental list of people capable of fighting him, not people who could defeat him necessarily, but people worthy of standing against him. That list included Roger, Whitebeard, Odin, and Shanks. All of these are legends, and Rox earned his place amongst them. When Rox fought Roger and Garp at the same time, he wasn't holding his own, he was winning. Neither of them could land lasting damage against him. Every attack that they managed to connect with, Rox either blocked with his own Haki or regenerated from it. The battle was an attrition stalemate. They had to combine their Supreme King Haki reserves into one massive attack just to damage Rox, and even then it didn't kill him. Garling had to execute a weakened, crippled Rox to finish him off. The demon transformation made Rox even more terrifying. He casually threw Kaido in full dragon form into a mountain hard enough to shatter it. He knocked Big Mom away with a knee strike, and he fought Whitebeard to a standstill, and their clash destroyed one of God Valley's mountains. Demon Rox towered over everyone, and had flaming eyes and possessed an immortal body that regenerated from injuries automatically. Roger and Garp's final attack, the one that broke the demon transformation, required them to unleash the critical mass of their Supreme King Haki at the same time. They had to go beyond what they'd ever done before just to break through Rox's defenses, and Rox was still alive after that attack. That's what makes Garling's execution so disgusting. Rox had challenged Roger and Garp at their peak and nearly won. He fought Emu directly and survived the initial confrontation. He defeated the Holy Knights despite their immortality, but he didn't die in glorious combat against worthy opponents. He died as a crippled shell executed by Garling while he was helpless. He wasn't given any honor or a warrior's death, it was just a coward's blade struck in the back. This now brings us to Domi Reversi, because this power single-handedly transformed Rox's narrative. Domi Reversi is Emu's ability to forcibly transform people into demons. We saw it first with the Davy family members who were hunting Rox, including his own father and grandmother. Rox had to kill his possessed family just to protect Eris and Teach. The truly cruel part was when Emu used Domi Reversi on Rox himself. The transformation wasn't instant. Rox fought against it with everything that he had. He taunted Emu, trying to maintain control through sheer willpower. He screamed about Davy D Jones being the original king of the world, trying to anger Emu into making a mistake. But when Emu revealed their plan to subjugate Elbaph, Rox lost his composure. That rage gave Emu the opening that they needed to complete the transformation. Rox had remained conscious inside of his demonically possessed body. He could see everything that he was doing. He could feel himself hunting Eris and Teach. He could sense himself attacking his own crew, defeating Kaido and Big Mom, fighting Whitebeard, but he couldn't stop. His body wasn't his own anymore. This is why Rox was crying during his fight with Roger and Garp. Those tears weren't from physical pain, they were from helplessness, from the complete violation of having his will stolen, from being forced to betray everything that he'd fought for, and then using the voice of all things, Rox managed to communicate one desperate message to Roger and Garp, as he tells them, "Please kill me." In the end, Rox had to beg his enemies to end his life. He couldn't even die on his own terms. He needed his rivals to grant him the mercy of death. Rox was the first member of the D clan that we've seen die without smiling. Every other D clan death has featured that iconic smile. Roger grinned at his execution. Ace smiled before dying in Luffy's arms. Podcast D Rouge smiled even as she gave her life to protect Ace. Even Jaguar D Sol laughed as Aokiji froze him. The D clan's smile in the face of death is iconic, but Rox didn't smile because he couldn't. Emu had stolen even that from him. When Garling delivered the final blow, Rox's face showed nothing but exhaustion and relief. Relief that the nightmare was finally over, and that Roger and Garp had stopped him before he could kill everyone on God Valley. And even more than that, relief that Eris and Teach had escaped. The demon transformation was Emu's ultimate punishment for Rox daring to challenge him. Emu didn't just want want Rox dead, they wanted him to be broken. Rox's character is intrinsically linked to Loki. Loki's relationship with Rox adds another layer of tragedy to the story. The 15-year-old prince, abused and blamed for every misfortune in Elbaph, found purpose through Rox's charisma. When Rox proclaimed his ambition to Harald, Loki was captivated. Rox was someone who didn't care about Loki's cursed eyes. He possessed power beyond anything that Loki had seen, and he wanted to rule the world. Loki idolized Rox so completely that he repeatedly begged to join his crew, and Rox repeatedly rejected him, not out of concern for Loki's safety or well-being, but because Rox simply didn't want a child on his ship. But for Loki, all of those rejections only made Rox more impressive. When Loki challenged Rox to a duel, Rox savagely beat him and left a blade impaled in him. This should have ended Loki's worship, but instead it intensified. Loki saw Rox's cruelty as strength. He saw Rox's ambition as purpose, and Rox became Loki's template for what power looked like. That interaction where Loki compared Rox to Nika is really interesting. Loki thought Rox was the sun god who would destroy the world, but Rox rejected that comparison, saying he wanted to rule the world, not destroy it. Rox believed only Harald had the power to destroy the world through controlling the Galila. This distinction is important. Rox saw himself as a conqueror, not a destroyer, but Loki didn't understand this nuance. He just heard rule the world and thought that sounded cool. Rox represented everything Loki wanted to be: powerful, feared, ambitious, and most importantly, free from the judgment of others. When Loki learned about Rox's death at God Valley, he cried. This cursed prince who'd been abused his entire life wept for someone who had brutalized him as a child. Loki blamed himself for being born in the wrong era, as if being born earlier would have let him help Rox succeed. In the present timeline, Loki still idolizes Rox. He wants to become king of the world, the same dream that Rox had. He despises the world government for killing Rox, and everything about Loki's ambitions trace back to that childhood worship of a man who never actually cared about him. There's an interesting parallel between Loki and Blackbeard. Both inherited Rox's dream of ruling the world and both idolize him to some extent, but Blackbeard is Rox's actual son, while Loki is essentially a fanboy with no real connection. When these two eventually clash, and I really hope that they do, it's going to be a battle over who's the true inheritor of Rox's will. Rox's infiltration of Merijo 56 years before the present timeline was one of the most insane acts in the history of One Piece. Rox killed an admiral, kidnapped 5 kings, and broke into Imu's private quarters, the Room of Flowers. This is the most sacred and secret location in the entire world government, and Rox just walked in there like he owned the place. Rox addressed himself to Imu as a worshipper of Davy Jones, essentially announcing his heritage without directly saying it. He tried to use the 5 kidnapped kings as bargaining chips, but Imu didn't care. They just ignored the hostages completely, which must have been a shock for Rox. What do you do when your leverage means nothing? Rox realized pretty quickly that he couldn't actually harm Imu, not yet. He didn't have the pieces that he needed. So instead of fighting a battle that he'd lose, Rox made a promise. He declared that he would return one day and dethrone Imu. It was a direct challenge to the secret ruler of the world. This promise is why Imu personally descended to God Valley. They didn't send Saturn alone. They didn't just rely on the Holy Knights. Imu themselves possessed Saturn's body and confronted Rox directly, because Rox had done what no one else had done in 800 years. He'd found Imu, learned their secret, and promised to come back. Their final confrontation at God Valley is when we see the full depth of their conflict. Rox screamed that Davy D. Jones was once the king of the world. Imu furiously denied it, insisting Jones was never king even for a moment, but their reaction proves that Rox had struck a nerve. Whatever happened 800 years ago between Imu and Davy Jones, it's personal enough that just the name makes Imu lose composure. Rox had even asked Imu which person they feared more, Davy Jones or Joy Boy. That question is huge. It confirms Rox knew about Joy Boy, about the Void Century, about the true history, and it positions Davy Jones on the same level as Joy Boy in terms of importance. These weren't just random pirates from 800 years ago, they were major players in whatever conflict shaped the world that the world government is trying to hide. Imu's response to Rox was that once Rox was eliminated, people like him would never appear again. It was important for the Davy bloodline to be extinguished. The Roxa kept fighting, even after being transformed into a demon. During that transformation, while barely maintaining consciousness, he taunted Imu about fearing the name Davy. He declared that someone would eventually inherit Davy D. Jones' will and fulfill that mysterious promise. Even as his body was being stolen and his mind was being suppressed, Rox refused to let Imu believe that they'd won. In the end, Rox never truly submitted, and he died believing that even if he lost, someone would carry on what Davy Jones started. Rox's impact on the world of One Piece is staggering when you actually examine it. His death directly or indirectly shaped every major power structure in the present timeline. The Four Emperor system exists because Rox's crew disbanded and formed their own legendary crews. Whitebeard became the strongest man in the world. Big Mom established Toto Land and the Big Mom Pirates, using the children as the foundation. Kaido created the Beast Pirates in Wano, ruling through strength and survival of the fittest. Three of the original Four Emperors were Rox's subordinates. The Revolutionary Army exists because Dragon witnessed the world government's atrocities at God Valley, seeing the celestial dragons hunt children for sport, seeing Marines murder civilians trying to escape, and seeing the systematic evil of the system. That's what radicalized Dragon. Without God Valley, Dragon might have stayed in the Marines like his father. Instead, he formed the freedom fighters that became the Revolutionary Army. The world government's paranoia about Elbaph traces directly back to Rox, revealing the Galila's importance. Imu stated at God Valley that they planned to subjugate Elbaph because giants would determine the victor of the coming Great War. The Five Elders' manipulation of Harald, their attempts to control Elbaph through political means, all of it stems from what Imu learned about Rox's plan. The government's cover-up of God Valley became their standard operating procedure for erasing inconvenient history. They'd done it with the Void Century, but God Valley proved that they were still willing and able to erase entire events from the present day. The fact that younger Marines like Drake don't know who Rox is shows how thoroughly the government can suppress information when they want to. Even the knowledge that Garp and Roger worked together was hidden. The government couldn't admit that a pirate helped save them, so they fabricated the entire narrative. Garp became the hero of the Marines for stopping Rox alone. Roger's involvement was erased, the Holy Knight's participation was covered up, everything about God Valley was rewritten to suit the world government's narrative. But Rox's most important legacy is his son. Marshal D. Teach inherited more than just his father's blood, he inherited the dream of ruling the world, as well as the Davy family's will. And unlike Rox, Blackbeard has been patient. He's built power methodically, and he claimed Hachinozu, Rox's old territory. He named his flagship the Saber of Xebec, and he's following in his father's footsteps, but learning from his father's mistakes. The interesting thing is that Blackbeard might not even know all of the details. Eris and Teach survived God Valley, but did they make it to Leluzia like Rox had planned? Did Eris tell Teach about his father's true identity, about the Davy bloodline, and about Imu? We don't know this yet, but Blackbeard's knowledge of certain things like the Will of D, like the Yami Yami no Mi's importance, it suggests that Eris passed along at least some of Rox's secrets to her son. The promise that Rox kept mentioning, the one tied to Davy D. Jones, remains unfulfilled. Imu is still ruling in secret, the world government is still suppressing history, the Davy bloodline is still being hunted, everything Rox fought against is still happening, but as Rox predicted, someone inherited that will. Maybe it's Blackbeard, maybe it's Luffy through some connection that we don't understand yet, maybe it's both of them, each representing different aspects of the D-Clan's purpose. Rox actually got to spend very little time with his son. Teach was born around 40 years before the present timeline. God Valley happened 38 years ago. That means Rox had approximately 2 years with his son before sending him and Eris to God Valley for protection. When Shakuyaku noticed how content Rox seemed after Teach's birth, she wondered if he'd found someone else since he wasn't obsessing over her anymore. Buckingham Stussy realized Rox had the pleasant attitude of a new father. These hard-edged pirates could see the change in him. Becoming a father had fundamentally shifted something in Rox's priorities. That's why Rox immediately sent Eris and Teach to God Valley. He knew the moment that his son was born, the world government would hunt him just for existing. The Davy bloodline made Teach a target before he could even walk. Rox couldn't risk keeping them on Hachinozu, where anyone could report back to the world government. God Valley, surrounded by the rest of the Davy family, was the safest option. But because of this, it meant that Rox barely knew his own son. He never never taught Teach about the Davy legacy personally, and he didn't train him to be a pirate. He never shared his dreams directly with him. Everything Teach might know about his father came from Eris after Rox died. The God Valley incident was supposed to be a rescue mission. Rox was going to save his family, retreat to Leluzia, and finally have a chance to actually be present in Teach's life. He'd accepted that he might not achieve his dream of ruling the world, but at least he'd have his family. At least Teach could inherit that dream and succeed where Rox failed. Instead, Rox was transformed into a demon and forced to hunt down his family. When Bartholomew Kuma teleported Eris and Teach away, the relief Rox must have felt, even when possessed, must have been overwhelming. They escaped. His son survived. Even if Rox died, even if he never saw them again, at least Teach and Eris would live. It does make you wonder whether if Eris had told Teach that he was Rox's son, or if she hid that information to protect him. The fact that when Blackbeard's name was nominated for Warlord status, even Sengoku didn't know about the connection to Rox, which suggests that Eris could have kept that secret to herself. It makes you wonder if Blackbeard knows that he's following his father's path. Does he know about Rox's master plan? Does he know about the 2 specific devil fruits his father needed, or about the Galila? Because if Blackbeard has that information, then he's not just inheriting his father's dream, he's trying to complete his father's plan. And that makes Blackbeard infinitely more dangerous than we realize. After everything that we've learned about Rox D. Xebec, it's hard not to fall in love with this character. Despite him being a villain, demonstrating that he was cruel, violent, and willing to hurt children to get what he wanted, he has still won over the majority of One Piece fans. He assembled a crew of legendary criminals and led them on a 2-year rampage of destruction, which included 16 raids, 76 sunken ships, and 14 burned ports with 5 level towns and a destroyed kingdom. The chaos Rox caused was immense, and his impact upon the world was undeniable, but there were 2 sides to his character. Deep down, Rox was a father trying to protect his family from a government that wanted them dead for just being born. He was a descendant of an apparently legendary king whose bloodline had been hunted for 800 years. He was someone who really respected his friends like Harald, even when they disagreed with him, and he had a code of honor for those that he valued, and he was willing to die if it meant that his family survived. During those God Valley flashback chapters, people were talking about how incredible Rox is, and how he's totally outshined characters like Roger, and that truly is a testament to the incredible writing that Oda has done with Rox. No matter how hard the world government may try, one thing is for certain: the name Rox D. Xebec or Davy D. Xebec will not remain forgotten. The world government tried to erase him, but his legacy refuses to die. Rox was undeniably the strongest of his era. He was the most feared, and he was the man Roger and Garp had to work together to defeat. But Rox's story isn't over, because somewhere out there Blackbeard is carrying on his father's dream, and when the final war comes, when the truth about the Void Century is revealed, hopefully everyone within One Piece will remember Rox's name once again. But yeah, we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts about the character of Rox D. Xebec? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention about Rox's character, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next one.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.